Kia ora koutou. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Progress in Practice by Go Well Consulting. Progress in Practice is the series where we profile the genuine sustainability and circular economy initiatives being brought to market by the businesses we work with. I'm Nick Morrison and this is the show where good ideas meet real world action. A quick note before we go any further, this episode runs a little bit longer than usual. Conversation with Nick, yes, another Nick, was so good we didn't want to cut it short, so settle in for a slightly longer episode. So yeah, today we're heading to Marlborough wine country and to a family business with roots that go back over 160 years. Rose Family Estate is the home of the globally renowned Wairau River Wines. They also produce the brands River Law, Rose and Rose, and Turning Heads. Today, the business is still proudly family owned with 15 vineyards covering around 500 hectares. They've also got a restaurant, a winery, and their own bottling hall. So today, we're not talking about wine. We're talking about water and what happens to it after it's been used in the winemaking process. You may or may not know this, but winemaking is a water-intensive business, particularly from the cleaning and processing phases. And for years, like many wineries, what happened to the wastewater at Rose Family Estate wasn't always the best use of that resource. So they decided to up their game and they invested in a new on-site wastewater treatment plant that is transforming how they manage one of their most significant environmental impacts. And they are getting a lot of interest from other vineyards within Marlborough and across the country. As you'll hear in this conversation, Rose Family Estate's commitment to sustainability and a circular economy is for the long term. They know it needs to be a way of doing business now and for future generations. And this wastewater mouthful treatment plant is one tangible expression of that. In the conversation you're about to hear, we speak with Nick Entwistle, who is the Chief Winemaker at Rose Family Estate. He's going to tell us about why they built the wastewater treatment plant, how it works, and what difference it's already making. Hope you. Kia ora, Nick. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning. Great to be here.
Thanks, mate. Well, we always like to know where our guests are in the world. So where are you coming to us today?
From sunny Marlborough, in the heart of wine growing country.
Fantastic. And is it a sunny day there today?
It is. It's not too bad. We had quite a cool morning this morning. We haven't had any frosts yet, so the vines have still got a bit of leaf on the canopy. But we're coming up to winter time when the vines will shut down and we'll start pruning. So it's a nice quiet period just after vintage for us.
Oh, fantastic. And just quickly on the frosts, that's a pretty big deal for winemakers, right? And vineyards. Is that?
Yeah, the timing can be for sure. So some winter frosts are actually good. They help sort of initiate dormancy within the vines. The vines actually draw a lot of sap down into the roots, and then that's when we go and prune all the vineyards. But it's the spring frost that people often hear about when the grapes, when the vines start growing again and you have little green shoots. If you get frosted at that stage, you can lose the entirety of your crop in one night, which is pretty bad.
Oh, very good. Oh, well, as much as I'm interested in that, we're not here to talk to you about frosts today. We're here to talk to you about your Progress in Practice initiative that's happening at Rose Family Estate Winery. Can you tell us what it is, please?
Yeah, I mean, the main focus that we've been looking at is around wastewater treatment. So that's one of the big challenges that we have in wineries. You know, we are an industrial process. We're growing grapes out in the vineyard, but we are bringing them into the winery. And as part of that process, we do generate waste streams. And one of those big waste streams is wastewater. And so there's a requirement for all of the wineries to treat that wastewater and either irrigate it back to their vineyards or irrigate it back to some other form of land. And so the project that we'd initiated well over 10 years ago was looking at how we manage our wastewater to make sure that we can continue to grow the business and also that we're not doing any detrimental environmental damage to our land. So we're quite unique in Marlborough that the Rose family owns 100% of our vineyards. And so it's very, very important for Phil and Chris and the other family members that everything we do, we're actually improving our soils and our vineyards for the next generation rather than, creating any environmental harm, which has been a possibility for vineyards in the past, and we've all seen news articles around Grape marc and leachate and those kind of things. So the ultimate goal for us was to put some systems in place to deal with those wastes, and then actually look at ways that we could bring value back to some of our vineyards as well from some other initiatives tied to the back of it.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, we're going to get into some of the details of it, but I just want to go back firstly to you talked about the wastewater. I need to understand, where does that come from in the process of squeezing the grapes and getting the wine out? Where does the wastewater come from?
We don't add any water to the grapes or to the wine, but there's a lot of cleaning involved, obviously. So every day we have trucks coming to the winery, processing grapes. We're squeezing them in the presses, and in between each of those press cycles, someone goes inside the press, digs the skins out. Those are spread back on our vineyards, but then they're also rinsing out the tank at that stage. And so there's a lot of juice material, a lot of grape skins, a lot of seeds, and those kind of things that get washed down the drains. And then, so all of that contains organic acids like tartaric acid and citric acid. There's some cleaning products involved as well. And then also there's a lot of sugar at that time of the year. And so that combination of some of those compounds that can be in there can actually be really detrimental to soil health. And so wineries need to collect all of that water and treat it appropriately before they're allowed legally to spread it back out again.
Right. Okay. And so is that a New Zealand legal requirement, or is that pretty common practice across the world with vineyards?
It's common practice around the world. Each of the regional councils will have their different environment plan monitoring requirements. So in Marlborough, we have the Marlborough Environment Plan, and so we have to meet some basic requirements around that. And then depending on where the winery is based, they may have a permitted activity, which means they meet the general rules, or they may be required to have a resource consent, which then applies some additional monitoring or application parameters on the winery. And so it really depends on where you're based, what the scale of your production is, and what your treatment processes you have in place. So you can treat things less, but then you have much more stringent monitoring and application requirements, or you can treat things like we do really thoroughly, and then there's actually much less requirement from the council in terms of some of the resource consent requirements that we have to meet.
Right. So tell me, I want to understand now the difference from your current, or the updated, the modern kind of wastewater treatment plant that you've got running now versus what you did before that, and what's been the big sort of changes in terms of the process and the impact for you guys and the impact on the land. Can you give us a bit of a rundown between the old and the new?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the sort of key principles of wastewater for wineries anyway is around capture of that liquid material, consolidation and settling to remove the majority of those solid particles. Often there's a screening process involved where there's a rotary screen that pulls out all the seeds and any stones that have been washed down the drain. Then there's a pre-settling prior to a bioreactor, and what that does is it pulls a lot of those solids and a lot of the BOD containing material. And so BOD stands for biological oxygen demand. Essentially, it's a measure of how damaging the liquid can be to the soil. So the higher the BOD, the more difficult it is for soil microbes to break down and deal with, and the more detrimental it can be. And so that pre-settling helps drop out a lot of these high BOD containing compounds. Then it progresses into a bioreactor, and that bioreactor is essentially like a large fermentation. And so we have a mix of yeast and bacteria that are within that media that we both feed with supplemental nutrition, and then also the juice and wastewater that's coming through to eat a lot of the nitrogen and organic material that's in the wastewater. And then after that, we have a secondary settling, which drops out a lot of that biomass. And this is where the real difference between the way that we used to do it and we do it now. The old system, we lost all of that biomass. It was just settled and it went out into the vineyard. The new system actually has what's called a RAS system. It's return activated sludge. And so all of the microbes that are sort of passing through the wastewater stream and then settling out in the final settling are sucked back out and captured and returned to the bioreactor. So we're constantly concentrating those microbes, and so over time they actually build up this big biomass that's more capable of processing larger volumes of wastewater in shorter periods of time. And that's the biggest difference, is that we now have the capacity to deal with this huge peak in wastewater production during vintage. So to put it in perspective, during vintage, we probably use around 120,000 litres of water a day, which sounds crazy, but we're quite a large winery. Outside of vintage, we probably use 10 cubic metres of water a day. So you have this huge variation in the throughput, and it's very difficult to manage with the old system that we had, whereas now it's computer controlled, there's automated dosing, there's monitoring. We can log in remotely, we can make changes to the nutrition regime, we can monitor the BOD in real time, and so we can manipulate the way that we're treating that wastewater much more accurately than we could previously, and we can actually increase and slow down the throughput depending on how much is coming through every day.
And is it taking all of it? So you've got the capacity now to take all of your wastewater, process it all goes through there?
Exactly, yeah. So I think I had to have a look. So in a total annual year, I think the number that we're sort of putting through is around 8,500 cubic meters of water. So it's about 8.5 million liters of water, it sounds like a huge amount. But in our benchmarking against other wineries of our size, we're actually using about 80% of the current standard of water that a winery our size would use.
Really?
And that also includes water that's captured from rainfall as well. And so some of our tanks are outside. And so a portion of that water that's being processed is actually just rainfall. But we have to capture all of the liquid waste that falls on our production facility and treat it. We can't separate it.
Right, as part of the council requirements, right. And do you do a metric in terms of litres of water versus bottles of wine?
Yes,
efficiency kind of thing there, or?
Yeah, the standard one for us, I think we produce, it's about 1.17 litres of wine for every litre of water that we're using. So we're slightly under the 1-to-1, which is good. That's the right way to be.
And so that's the water that you're using to clean out the things and becomes the wastewater, but also the water you're using on the vineyard?
The water on the vineyard is a separate measure, and so that's added. That's added separately. So we do track that as well. We monitor all of the irrigation water, but I think that then probably uses another half a litre per bottle. So it's usually the standard number for most people is between 1.5 to 2 litres of water for 1 litre of wine. I think is sort of around the industry standard.
Fascinating. Just coming back to the new system. So, am I getting this right? That it's all natural biology that you're using, and so you're compounding it up, just letting these microorganisms, bacteria, etc., just do their natural thing. And you said something about you're sort of feeding them, so they're growing their numbers and therefore growing the capacity to take more. So you've not, is that right? You're just building up naturally the numbers of microorganisms in the system.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of yeast that flow through the winemaking process that are good at converting sugar into alcohol anyway. And so a lot of those are washed down the drain. But then there's also different types of wastewater bacteria, nitrifying bacteria and filamentous bacteria. And we do use specific nutrition regime and selected nutrients to promote the growth of some of those beneficial microbes. When we commissioned the plant in March 2023, we actually took a volume of wastewater from another winery, Whitehaven Wines, which is just across the road, who have a similar wastewater plant or the same wastewater treatment facility as ours. And we seeded our wastewater plant with some microbes from them. And then we actually, in that first vintage, we had to feed a lot more inorganic and organic nutrition because we just didn't have that biomass to deal with the volume. Whereas now we've got this huge biomass, and we actually have the opposite problem. We're coming off the back of vintage in the last month or so. We processed around 8,500 tons of grapes this year. And now we're just essentially cleaning tanks and doing bottling, and there's only clean fresh water flowing through the winery, and so we have to then try and reduce that biomass. And so it's just this challenge, in the lead up to vintage, increasing that biomass so it can deal with all of the wastewater we're generating in a short period. And then after vintage, we actually almost wean it off. We have to wean off the wastewater plant, and then we drop the levels down, and then we actually remove a lot of that biomass so that we've got only the right amount to handle the nutrient load that's going in the front end. So it's quite technical, but it's actually just like a big fermentation. People laugh at me. They're like, "Oh, you're so excited about wastewater." I'm like, for me, I just like fermenting things, and it's just another thing to ferment.
Well, I can't help but thinking it sounds like you've sort of made yourself into like some kind of microbe farmer, where you're having to kind of manage the amount of microbes you've got within your system throughout the year.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there's lots of, we looked back in the past at a lot of different types of processes and wastewater treatment plants. There's when you're dealing with human sewage, you have different processes in place, and if you're looking for different outcomes, if you're looking to have clear, potable, drinkable water, then the treatment processes that we're using, you would need to adapt, and you would need to modify something on the back end. I think one of the key things is people working out what they really want to achieve. What's the end goal? If they want to have potable, drinkable water that they can reuse in their winery, that's great, but you need to install a different type of wastewater management system. And so that, I think, has been one of the big key learnings for us over the time when we were thinking about it, because although we commissioned it in 2023, I would say it had been at least 10 years prior to that we'd started thinking about upgrading the system and finding the right partner and construction company and design company to work with to actually make something that worked for us, because there's plenty of people that come out and they've got the shiniest wastewater system in the world, but if it takes a lot of time to manage and it's always breaking down and it can't manage the throughput, it's not appropriate for wineries. And I think that's one of the key successes of what we've had, is we managed to find something that really works for our process harmoniously and achieves the goals that we want to achieve.
Great point. Before we go on, I just want to quickly go back and just clarify. You said earlier something about and that will just go down the drain. When you say that, you mean down the drain and into the wastewater system. So it all goes and then
exactly.
So then once it's been treated, how long does it sort of take for I don't know how you measure this, but how long does it sort of take the water to be treated once it goes in? And then what do you do with it once it has been treated? It's got to the kind of standard you need it to be.
Yeah, so during vintage, we're sort of inputting around 120,000 litres, like I said, of water a day. The bioreactor alone holds 650,000 litres, and then the pre-settling and the post-settling is another 120,000 cubic metres of water. So when you sort of spread it out, it's about 7 to 8 days. We think that if you said, look, a litres going in and you displaced all of the litres that were coming out, it's about a week. But it really depends on the throughput. And so, at this time of year when we're only putting 10 cubic metres down, the bioreactor is probably not being replenished. It would take 2 or 3 months for the entire bioreactor to be replenished. Whereas during vintage, yes, I would say the water's coming in and being treated, and within a week, that particular litre of water that came in the front end is going out. What we do with it, previously we had been trying to irrigate some of that product back to our vineyards to mitigate some of the irrigation that we need during the summer period for growing the grapes. But the challenge with winery wastewater systems is we're producing the large volume of water after the growing period, and during vintage we're actually not looking to irrigate the vineyards. Can lead to dilution, can lead to berry splitting issues. And so part of the challenge we always had previously was we needed to harvest a block so that we could then put that irrigation on, because there's some quite beneficial nutrition in there. But the other challenge is, because we're not filtering the water to a point where there are no microbes left in it, we can't run it through the drip irrigation, the normal irrigation that's going under the vines. It sort of clogs up, and because those are black irrigation pipes that get hot in the sun, you can get problems with essentially re-fermentation within the pipes and a build-up of microbes. So what we actually did is we took out 5 hectares vineyard, and now we have it's like a park. We have a wastewater irrigation field that we spread on specifically, and it's taken away a lot of those challenges around balancing the requirements for the vine nutrition, but it's also meant that we've got this big open space. It's grass covered. We can run animals through there if we're looking to bring the grass down. If we're seeing increases in nutrient levels, we can cut and carry. So we can cut the grass or make hay essentially and take that off site. And so we're removing some of those nutrients that are accumulating in those soils off site. And equally, if we're needing to make any soil applications of hydrated lime or any pH type adjustments, or adding in biochar or anything else, it's an open field. And so I'll be honest, that was one of the challenges that I had to overcome when I was trying to pitch this idea to the Rose family and to the board of directors was, hey, look, we need to sacrifice 5 hectares of productive vineyard for wastewater that, in theory is not bringing us any value, but the value that it brings to us is the fact that we can continue to process, and we know that we're not creating any detrimental environmental effects. That is the real value for us. And it's just been so much better that we're now to the point where the council brings people to us to showcase as an example of, this is how you should set up a wastewater field, this is how you should set up a wastewater plant, these are the things that you need to consider. Because look, we're honest, we were struggling prior to the point that we installed this larger wastewater plant. We'd grown from a capacity of around 2,000 tonnes to the 10,000 tonnes capacity that we are now. We were sort of midway through that journey. And as we were growing, we were finding that the existing wastewater plant just couldn't handle it. It was fine for 320 days of the year, but those sort of 45 days of vintage, it took so much management, and I was having to focus all of my energy on wastewater management and none of my energy on winemaking. And the real thing that makes us the money is the winemaking, not the wastewater. So we've flipped that around, and so now it's the management costs are so much less. Less.
What do you just sort of plan for more growth? Like, has it got capacity to take more again? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we've actually spec'd the wastewater plant to handle a processing capacity of 15,000 tonnes. And so that's another third larger than we are currently. And it was on the back of some work that we'd been doing previously around consolidation of our vineyard holdings. So the family owns over 500 hectares here in Marlborough now, and they were looking to secure some old historic Rose family land that had been part of their family history in the past. That became available. We then had to work out how we're going to process all this incoming fruit. So we expanded the winery. Tanks to hold the wine was the sort of cost number one that we had to deal with. But then ultimately it got to the point where, hey, all of this additional volume that we're bringing in is also just creating this additional volume of waste. We need to upgrade the wastewater too. And so that was the impetus. And I think, timing is everything. And it was a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But once we had that push and there was commitment from the family that they wanted to increase their production, there was then no questions from the board that we needed to upgrade the wastewater at the same time. So it was great. It was a huge amount of work. It was sort of all around COVID times as well. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the market when we were making these decisions. And then, ultimately in 2023, we turned the switch on the wastewater, and we haven't looked back.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we didn't actually work with you at the time, Nick, but we worked mostly with Parky or Lindsay and the exec team in developing you guys a sustainability strategy. It would have been about 2022, I think, that we were working just around end of COVID sort of lockdowns and stuff. So, and I remember him talking about that as a bit of a challenge. So it's amazing to see where you guys have taken it from those days. We've got some photos that I want to show in a minute, but before we go there, I want to ask about the stakeholders that have been involved with this, because you sort of touched on a little bit, but it's just an acknowledgement that when it comes to these, what we're calling progress in practice, these initiatives that companies are bringing to market that are actual circular economy and sustainability sort of designed, I guess, solutions, it's almost impossible to do it on your own, right? And you've already touched on some of the various people, but I'd like you just to go into that a bit more, like who have been the sort of key stakeholders in developing this solution around your wastewater treatment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the wastewater plant itself was developed and built by a local company here called Hydromic. And so they were very open throughout the entire process around designing something that was specifically for us. We were quite lucky that they'd already made some installations at a couple of other larger wineries, Whitehaven, I mentioned previously, and then also Morisco Vineyards. Yeah. And so we could go and have a look and actually sort of ask their operators questions around management, costs, all of those kind of things, because I think in the wine industry, we often look to other industries for innovation, but we are quite unique. And so it was really great to be able to go out and actually, talk to other wineries, and then also talk to the Marlborough District Council compliance officers that have been monitoring the outputs from those particular wastewater treatment plants to get feedback from them as well. And so, we at the same time looked at the monitoring requirements that were going to be coming from this wastewater treatment plant. And so we actually pushed back on the council and made some changes to the monitoring that they were requiring from us. And so we didn't make any changes in the way that we were managing the system or any of the testing that we were doing. But we said, look, we are doing all of these things. We're treating the wastewater to this particular level. Do you need to be monitoring us as much? Because all of that compliance comes with a cost. And so we managed to save a huge amount of compliance costs through working with the council via our resource management consultant, who was Steve Wilkes at Wilkes Resource Management, to negotiate some of the requirements around what we were going to do. Because I think, like you said, when you're trying to do some of these new projects that haven't been done before and you're thinking in a new way, some of the existing rules and regulations are not really fit for what you're doing. There's sort of a box. And so we had a lot of meetings with council and a lot of meetings with Steve and also with Hydromic to say, look, well, this is the way that we're going to manage it. This is not the way that people have managed it previously, but does this meet your requirements? And, essentially there was a level of trust that was required that ultimately we were going to prove that this thing worked properly in the way that it was. And so, those are the sort of the three key big ones, I would say, is Hydromic, the Marlborough District Council, and Steve Wilkes at Wilkes Resource Management. But there's a huge number of other people. We had, engineers, soil scientists, environmental management scientists, concrete engineers, project management companies. Like it was big. It's quite a huge project, actually. I look back on it and things seem a lot easier now that I'm not having to do it, but it was fun.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I want to ask about the sort of commercial side of it. So obviously it would cost a fair bit of money to do it all. Have you got a good return on investment? And are you able to kind of give us an indication of kind of what that payoff period might be? Like you talked a bit about the savings from the regulation costs and stuff, but are you able to kind of give us a bit of an idea of the payback period from a kind of commercial perspective?
Sort of. I think, ultimately the goal from the family was, it's not like a solar installation or something where we're reducing largely, like our ongoing cost. It's more of something that we needed to do to ensure that we could continue to produce grapes and grow, and then also that we weren't making any environmental, there was no environmental damage for our own land. That being said, the wastewater plant itself, I think the total cost was around $1.5 million. And at the time, we managed to get a green loan through ANZ, which reduced our interest rate by 1% on that total loan amount. And so, that's saving us around $15,000 a year on some of the loan repayments. And yes, there are some savings. I would suggest probably in our monitoring costs, we've saved probably almost that number again, another $10,000 to $15,000 a year in some of the reporting, some of the testing requirements, and then also the amount of management that's required. And so $30,000 a year into $1.5 million is still a really long payback. But Phil and Chris have been farming here since 1978, and the intention is that the third generation is now entering the business. That this is something that they're setting up for the next 40 years, 50 years, and so the payback is definitely, like, there's money involved, but that was never the reason for doing it. We'll always try and pay it back as quickly as possible. It's just good business. But
it just warms my heart, Nick, to know that we've got businesses that are thinking intergenerationally here. Like, it's such a common problem with businesses is they're just thinking the next quarter, that financial year, maybe a couple of years out. It's hard enough with us when we write our strategies, typically 3 years, and trying to get businesses to think that far ahead. So to have a business, and it's not coincidental that it's a family business, but really thinking longer term and setting up for longer term success. And it does require investment at some point, right? You can't always get a instant return on these investments, and so it's really encouraging to know that there's that kind of long term thinking going there. Can I just ask lastly, sort of in terms of payback type thing, is there much of a impact on your brand, do you think? Are you telling the story a lot? You're trying to get it out there a lot, or not really? It's just, again, it's something that you're just doing for these. Yeah, we are.
I mean, that was part of the reason to bring you guys on board originally as well, was to help us get more comfortable about talking about some of the things we do, because that being a family business, a lot of it's just business as usual for us. It's just the right thing to do, and so traditionally we hadn't been as good as talking about some of the things that we have been doing as some other businesses. And so dealing with yourselves, and then also leveraging some of this and some of our marketing has actually made us feel more comfortable about talking about some of these things that we're doing, because in this world we know there is a lot of greenwashing that can go on, and we were always conscious to not try and stick our heads up too far. We're just like, we just stick to our knitting, we do what we're doing. But I think there's a few of us now, Paki as well, we've spoken about the wastewater, we've sort of taken leadership roles in other areas, and we're actually pushing a lot of this information and learning that we have from our own business back out to the industry. And so we've hosted open days for the industry. The council brings people through from time to time to look at the wastewater field, and I think it was a real turning point for the business, where we actually got this hub. We like to refer to the wastewater system as a hub. It's given us the opportunity to go out and investigate a lot more other sustainability initiatives than we had previously. And so I think when you were initially involved, it was mainly just focused on the wastewater. Now the wastewater is just the vehicle that's allowing us to do a lot of other things, because there's still so much more opportunity in other waste streams or other things that we're processing and doing. That's even more exciting, and they will definitely give us more payback than the wastewater, because anything going to landfill or any liquid waste that are going to the oxidation ponds, that's a real cost, and if we can stop doing that and start composting or start mixing some of these products that we're producing from the winery and taking that nutrition back to our vineyards, that's the ultimate goal, and that's been a lot of what we've been working on in the last 2 to 3 years.
Just on that point, you just made me think. See, there's so much going on, obviously, at the moment. Today's the 22nd of May and 26, and the war in Iran and the access to fossil fuels, both as a form of energy but also as a form of fertilizer in New Zealand, is really problematic. Have you done any calculations in terms of the savings from not needing to use fertilizers and importing fertilizers by using the what do you call it? The marc, is it? The byproducts that come out of it?
Yeah. So Grape marc's something that we've been doing forever. And, again, Phil was a pioneer in this area, and it's only the last sort of 10 years that a lot of other wineries have cottoned on to the fact that they can do what we call as green spreading. So you pick the grapes, you squeeze them at the winery. Traditionally, you would pile them all up and you would compost them, and the composting is really great. It breaks down a lot of those compounds, but then you have this added problem where there's a lot of liquid leachate that comes from it, and it's a high BOD product. And as maybe some of the listeners have heard, wineries have been in trouble in the past when they've put Grape marc on the ground. It's leaked into streams and caused all sort of environmental problems. The way that we deal with it as a more immediate solution, where we're actually green spreading, we're composting in a very thin layer in the vineyard. So truck comes to the winery, it dumps, we press the grapes, those grapes skins and seeds go back out to that same vineyard straight away, and we have a tractor and a spreader, and it spreads them immediately. And so you don't have that same issue with composting, where you're generating a lot of this high concentrated liquid that's coming out. And within a week, all of those skins have broken down naturally themselves, just like if the grapes fell off the vines themselves. And so from some calculations that I did, I think last year, we were sending about 4.5 tons of potassium back to the vineyards that normally we would have to bring in and supplement to maintain the level of potassium in the soil. So grapevines and grapes suck up a lot of potassium from the soils, and there's a lot of potassium in the skins. So the more skins that we can return, the more potassium we send back. Obviously, there's some nitrogen in the unfermented grape skins, but it is only a small amount. And that's one of the key monitoring metrics for the council, to ensure that we're not spreading the Grape marc too thickly, that we're not allowed to put more than 200 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year onto any of our vineyards, whether that's from Grape marc or inorganic nitrogen or compost or whatever way we want to do it, or through fertigation. And so we're monitoring that, and we do soil testing across the vineyards, and then if we're identifying areas that are lacking, then we'll target some of the Grape marc to go back to those vineyards. The nitrogen is not it's not a huge amount. We're talking like 20 kilos per hectare, something like that. But the potassium is really, really significant.
Yeah, right. I just love, as you're talking there, just those circular economy principles are coming through really thick and strong. And so I just want to quickly touch on the group that you're a part of, the Marlborough circular wine group, that I know that you've been. You actually had to rush away from an event with them this morning to be with us today. Thank you. So just quickly touch us or tell us about that and the work that you're doing there, and into applying what you're learning at Rose Family Estate to help other vineyards within Marlborough.
Yeah, so it's a collective of winery groups, large and small, that sort of come together to try and create more circular solutions for some of the challenges that we have. And so there's quite a few different areas that we work in. Waste is definitely one of them. Grape marc spreading, winery wastewater, leads, bentonite, anything that's going to landfill or the oxidation ponds. We also do a lot of work around regenerative viticulture. So in the next month, we have a lady coming to run seminars and talk about vineyards around, some of the things that they can do to make themselves more regenerative. We deal with solar. We've got the Wine Pro industry symposium that's happening next month here in Marlborough, and so there's a circular wine group solar discussion panel that I'm involved in, talking about the different options for vineyards and wineries, and we're pulling information from vineyards and wineries and from providers around the different options and solutions. And then we also deal a bit with things like labour, government policy, council, regulation changes, opportunities for new technologies, and making sure that some of the regulations fit and allow experimentation in some of those areas. So it's quite broad and diverse. And yes, the event that I came from this morning was actually an industry day talking about a new initiative that we're looking to set up, which is capturing all of the fermentation and bentonite lees. So the fermentation lees is just dead yeast that are used in the fermentation process that fall to the bottom of the tank. And the brewing industry's got a great outlet for it. They turn it into Marmite and Vegemite. They sort of mix it with molasses, and that becomes Vegemite. The wine industry hasn't got an outlet for ours because the acidity is different. It contains different compounds. So traditionally, all of that waste has been going to landfill. And so what this project is looking to achieve is a blending of the dried yeast lees and bentonite lees with compost and biochar, and then the reapplication of that product back to vineyards. And so the goal of the project that's being managed by the BRI, which is the BRAGATO Research Institute, which is New Zealand's wine research institute owned by the New Zealand wine growers, is to divert 50% of the solid waste that's going to the Marlborough District Council's landfill, away from landfill, and return that back to vineyards. And so we've got the opportunity to divert around 6,000 tonnes of winery waste that currently goes to landfill every year away. And so the project's goal in this first year is to divert 3,000 tonnes, and then ultimately year on year after that, once we work out some of the strategies, is to try and corner as much of that as possible. And that's a huge win for the industry, but it's also a huge win for the council. And so the majority of the work recently has been in getting acceptance from the council and understanding about what the project's objectives are, because it is something that hasn't been done before, and it's it's potentially a loss of revenue for the council that they charge a gate fee for things going in, but ultimately we're saying this will provide more value to the council because it extends the life of the landfill by at least another 5 years, and so the annual operating costs of the landfill and the cost to find a new site and build a new site far exceeds the incoming revenue cost.
Yeah. Isn't it slightly perverted that they would be incentivized to have more stuff going into a landfill? It's a problem.
I think it is a little bit. The councils are a business after all, but there is a push from central government, and one of the challenges that they have is these emissions charges continue to increase, and as we've seen in Auckland and Christchurch, places that are diverting curbside compost or green waste collection to places like EcoGas and Wairau, and they're developing that plant in Christchurch. There's a definite push from central government to recapture organic waste, and so the timing is great, and we have had great support from the council. But there is always the account side of it where they're like, they have to weigh up the loss of revenue of trucks not turning up every day.
It's a really good example of that kind of transition right out of this linear economic system that we've inherited into the circular one, and it has to happen just because of physics. But there's these commercial and sort of financial things that need to be shifted as well. And I think it's really where councils and governments need to come together and really have a good plan there. Just quickly, two more things on this. One, have you looked at anaerobic digestion as a solution for that, and turning it into energy and fertilizer through that process?
There's a big winery in Chile, actually, a really huge winery, and the name escapes me off the top of my head, but essentially this one winery is larger than the entirety of New Zealand's wine growing production all in one. Wow. Like, it's huge. And so they had this big consolidated facility, and they've been taking all of their own Grape marc, all of their own lees waste, all of their wastewater sludge too, and so some of that biosolids that I've been talking about, that is another opportunity for us to integrate some of that nutrition back into our vineyards. And yes, they've sort of worked out a way that they can store it, because one of the challenges with all of these products is being able to store them and process them efficiently. You can accumulate all this waste in a very short period of time, but it goes off. It doesn't keep very well. And so they managed to work out a way to ensile the Grape marc, and then they also bring in fruit waste and meat waste and from fish processing plants in Chile. And so yes, the ultimate goal would be to do that. And I know that the Marlborough District Council is also looking at doing something in the future, because sewage and human sewage treatment systems have huge opportunity for biogas production as well. But it's just finding the right, getting the logistics sorted first. And so that's why this BRI project is really exciting. We're tackling the practicalities of managing the system first, and then on the back side of that are some PhD projects and a lot of science to confirm what we're doing is the right way to do it. And it's all based on a huge amount of literature review. We're very confident in what we're doing, but oftentimes projects like this go out to research first, and they come back with these findings saying, yes, the wine industry has a huge opportunity to valorize their Grape marc, but they ignore the fact that we produce hundreds of thousands of tons within a 3-week period, and all of the processing that they are doing can only deal with 10 kilos at a time, and it would take 100 years to deal with it. So that's the really exciting thing about this project, is we're tackling the the physicality first, and then the science is coming to back it up afterwards.
I just love the ripple out effects that you can have on the wider community there with something like that. It's trying to solve your solution around your great byproduct, the leaves material, but then to your point, you've got all this capacity. Then what else could you be doing? And human waste is a great example. The other thing that I wanted to just quickly mention, we've done another episode of Progress in Practice with Kowtow, who are a fashion brand based in Wellington, and they have worked on a solution to turn their unwanted or unfixable clothes into biochar. So maybe we should connect you with them and talk perhaps about biochar there, because they have they've got all this repair program and take back program and all this stuff to keep their their garments in circulation for as long as possible. But once they just literally cannot be reworn anymore, then obviously we're just going to landfill as well. So now they've found a way to turn them into biochar, and they're supercharging it, if that's the way to say it, with like a seaweed mixture, because as you'll know, the biochar is, if you just put it straight under the soil, it sucks a lot of the nutrients out. So you've got to put something into it. And so, that might be something to consider. It's still very much early days, but it just shows you we're on this path, right? And it's so exciting from my perspective and the work we do at Go Well, and sort of seeing this bigger picture. Here's a solution for clothing waste, and here's a solution for grape waste, and they potentially come together in the years ahead.
I watched the episode last night, actually.
Oh, you did? There you go.
Yeah, and we're working with a company here called the Green Circle, and they've been pioneering biochar production, and so they've done some work with Yealands around biochar production from Grape marc. They do a lot of biochar production, obviously from wood chip waste from the sawmill, and so the site that we're proposing is actually 200 meters from the local sawmill here. So like the location is just great. Any of those times, like you said, that we can minimize the amount of transport is definitely ideal. And then they're also looking at integrating potentially in the future things like mussel waste and waste from pine nut production that we have locally here in Marlborough as well. And then there's olive oil pomace. I'm harvesting the olives from my property tomorrow, actually, and that's another challenge that I have to think of, because I have to take back all the olive pomace, and my little garden can handle a certain amount, but when you got 200 or 300 kilos of olive pomace, you got to find something to do with it. It makes good soap, but
it's a good example. Lots of other industries out there that will have a similar problem that you've got, where they just suddenly have this big amount of biomass that they need to process, and only for a short period of time. Hey, I'm going to show those photos that I mentioned. I'm just going to share the screen here, and I know that there's a couple of images here showing your wastewater treatment plant in process. So now we're seeing on the screen, sorry for those who are not watching this but listening, but we've got two photos here, and one you can see a big metal tank and a whole lot of kind of metal boxes that are all connected in some way on the left there, and then on the right it looks like the big field that you were talking about. Can you just run us through what we're looking at?
Yeah, so the photo on the left, that's the wastewater treatment plant, and so it's on a big concrete pad. It's fully bunded, so if we have any sort of failures in any of the pumps or any of the systems, or we have a flood, it's all contained. It can actually, not hold the entirety of the volume, but I think it can hold up to about 100,000 litres of liquid if we had a flood or something. On the bottom left of the picture, you can see a sort of a stainless steel thing with a chute coming out the side. That's what we call a contrashare, and it's a big rotating drum which has holes in it, and the seeds the seeds and stems get captured on the inside, and the liquid falls through. It's almost like a mining trommel, and so that means that we're reducing a lot of that really heavy solid stuff before it goes into the preliminary settling tanks, which is the closest row of concrete tanks that you can see there. And they're linked in a big snake system. So if you think about a particle that's settling over time and it's traveling along a river, the longer the river, the more time it has to settle. So rather than having a small number of really big tanks, we have a large number of really small tanks, and they're long. And so liquid enters at one end and exits at the other end, and then it wiggles its way through to the right-hand side, and then it wiggles its way back to the other side. And then on the side of those tanks, you can also see it's quite small, but there's a lot of dots down the side of them. Those are monitoring valves so that we can monitor the amount of sludge that we're collecting within those tanks. And then that gives us an indication of when we need to suck those biosolids out. And you'll just be able to see in the top left-hand corner of that picture, there's a couple of big black bags on the pad. Those are what we call geo bags. And so what we do is we're sucking the biosolids out of the wastewater settling tanks and putting them into those bags, and then all of the liquid that's associated with that drains back out onto the pad and goes back through the wastewater. And we capture all of that really fine material and we dry it out. And so over about a 6-month period, we can put 20,000 litres of liquid into one of those bags. We get about 5,000 kilos, 5 tons of solid material that we can then either dispose of to the landfill, or we can integrate into this new system that we're looking at developing at the moment, where we mix it in with compost and biochar and some of the dried leaves as well, and spread it back to our vineyards, because there is a lot of good nutrition in there. It's just the liquid component of it contains a lot of high BOD. So if we can continue to treat the liquids and we capture the solids, that's great. Then what happens is the liquid goes down into a sump that you can't quite see on this picture, but it's embedded in the ground. So all of this is just running via gravity. There's no pumps involved at this stage. And that means it reduces a huge amount of our energy costs, goes down into a mixing tank, which is embedded in the ground, and the pH is adjusted because the microbes that I referred to earlier are really susceptible to pH changes. And ultimately, the liquid that's coming out the other end of the wastewater treatment plant needs to meet some pH requirements for the council as well. So we pH adjust and we add nutrition at that stage automatically. Then it's lifted up into that big bioreactor on the right-hand side that you can see. And so that's a 650,000 litre water tank. And there's 4 tubes that you can see sort of poking down in the centre of it. Those are vertical suction blowers. And so what they do is they suck air down through the tube and blow it into the bottom of the bioreactor. And that mixes the product. So that's sort of in the centre of the big swimming pool looking thing. So they suck air down and then they churn the tank over. And so, people might be familiar with oxidation ponds that the councils have, and those machines that churn up the water on the top. That's to just bring oxygen back in. And because we're putting in a lot of high BOD product, the bacteria and yeast that are in there consume oxygen during that process of breaking down the BOD. That's what biological oxygen demand means. So we have to supplement a huge amount of oxygen to allow them to survive. And so those things are running automatically. It monitors the BOD in real time, also monitors for any foaming, monitors if there's a problem with any of the pumps or it's just going to overflow or any of those kind of things, and sends us a text message. Then what it does is it flows through that small green shed there that you can see, and that modulates the flow. And so as we were talking about previously, we can control the output to the vineyard automatically based on modulation of that valve. And then it flows into the secondary settling tanks, which are the ones on the back side there, that resettles all of the biosolids that are then sucked off the bottom of those tanks and go back to the bioreactor. And then the last tank on the left-hand side is the discharge tank, and it pumps from there out down to the back of the vineyard, and then that's the picture that you can see on the right-hand side there. So this is a 5-hectare block. It's around 4.5 hectares of irrigation spreading range, because we have some limitations around proximity to the neighbour's vineyard, on the bottom side of that picture there. So we have to keep a 10-metre buffer of anything that we're spraying. But you can see the sort of soil structure that we're dealing with. On the left-hand side, it's quite rich soils, and on the right-hand side, it's old degraded riverbed. So it's very, very stony, and so it's very free draining. And so we don't have any issues with ponding. If anything, that area is dry for 90% of the year. But one of the key things we do have to worry about is is making sure that we're treating that wastewater, because on the right-hand side of that picture, there's actually a waterway running just to the right-hand side there, down through there. Exactly. That's a tributary of the Wairau River that runs down in through Marlborough. And so, yeah, we're really conscious that we're in a location that is close to some of those waterways. So we want to be treating that water as well as possible. And also there's a cycleway along there now too, which is great. So we're actually we're doing some native plantings in the next couple of years on that boundary to just to showcase who we are, and people can see our wastewater field from there. We want them to actually, that to be a positive thing, that they're like, wow, look at that, that's the Rose Family Estate wastewater treatment field, as opposed to normally people are like, don't look at it, don't see it. We don't want people to know what's going on.
Oh yeah, I think it's great to get that information out there and share it with anyone who wants to know about it. Well, speaking of plantings, we've just got a couple more photos here that you can just sort of see the plantings all through the streams, both some sort of older growth here on the left and some newer growth here on the right. And then I've got another picture here of two more photos of you, obviously early days, planting out this section of the estate, and so is that just again part of your sort of values to look after the land, or is there other purposes behind this planting that you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty special site for us. That's our newest vineyard. It's called Hillocks Road, and it was a property that we purchased that had been a dairy farm for many years, but it was right in the zone of land that produces the style of wines that we like to produce. So in the right-hand picture that you can see there, this is our vineyard in the foreground. The vineyard that's just across the road there is actually a vineyard owned by Spy Valley, but then the vineyard after that is us again. And so it's in this corridor, the Rose families had a really long association with grape growing and farming within that area. And it was really important to the family when we purchased that property that we returned some of the waterways back to their, how they naturally would have been prior to it being a dairy farm. We also have another property, which you can't see in any of these photos, which is behind the drone on the left-hand shot. So we actually have another property there. So we've almost got this one continuous link through three of our vineyards that all have native plantings along all of their watercourses to build this green corridor. And we're really excited to also continue, on from our neighbours at Spy Valley there in the right-hand photo. Yeah. So one of the things that is really exciting here in Marlborough is we have these other projects going on as well called Greening Marlborough, or these green corridors, and it's looking at vineyards and wineries or any landowners in general, if they've got areas that they can plant, getting those registered on a map to then showcase all of these green corridors that actually are within Marlborough. And there's a hectare reserve which borders this vineyard as well that we're sort of joining into. And so it's really exciting to be able to plant all of these plants that we can take some of our customers out and have a look, and we do planting days with the winery, and people go down there and do weeding and all of those other kind of things. But ultimately, yes, viticulture can be a bit of a monoculture, and so the more that we can plant and establish, the better. I think off the top of my head, I think we planted around 7,500 plants at that vineyard alone. We planted 100 around the wastewater system recently, and then we've got the project that we're going to start this next spring season down the back of the winery along that cycleway that I'm talking about. And then prior to that, we've also got one other large vineyard down in the Dillon's Point area that had been planted prior to me starting. I think the plantings were done in around 2008 and 2009, and when we had the large Kaikoura earthquake, the plantings actually saved the vineyard. There was quite a lot of liquefaction and cracking in that area, and the vineyards surrounding us that didn't have native planting, a lot of their vineyards actually slipped and fell into the river, whereas where we were on the other side of the river, we had a lot of native planting actually held the soil together. And so again, that was just
there you go,
a really great example of forward thinking. And we get no payback from doing any of that, but ultimately, it just makes life easier in the long run. Otherwise you got to keep weeding and spraying and doing all that other stuff. Just plant it in natives and then forget about it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, right? Oh well, Nick, I feel like we could talk for the rest of the day. This conversation has gone a bit over our normal time, but it's been so fascinating to hear all the work that's going on at Rose Family Estate. So I want to say thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us today, and I also want to say thank you so much for doing this work and driving this. I know it's not just you, but you're clearly a very key person in this whole vision and the mahi that's going on there. So thank you for doing it, because you don't have to be doing it. It makes a lot of sense to you and me, but there's definitely others out there who might question the logic or the purpose of it all. So it's been really wonderful to hear what's gone on, the thinking behind it, the outcomes that you've had from doing it, the future thinking that you've been applying to a lot of this, and I just really thank you for doing that.
No, it's been a pleasure. And look, I couldn't do any of this work without the support of the Rose family. I've worked for that family for 17 years now, and it's, in this day and age to work for someone for that long, is a bit of a rarity. But look, Phil and Chris and the entire family have got, really strong sense of what they want to achieve. And, if you've got great ideas and, you can justify it, and they're really supportive of that too. And so, that's been amazing. I don't know whether there would be any other, many other businesses where I would have a similar level of support to go off and do all these crazy things.
Aren't you supposed to make the wine? What are you doing with planting all these trees? Oh, mate, well, thank you again. Keep it up. Let's keep in touch. We maybe have to check back in another, a few months or year or so and see what more progress you've made in that time. But we really, really appreciate all that you do, all that you've been doing, and taking some time to share what you've learned and what you've been doing with us today. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, Mate wa. Kia ora again. Hi, Ron. That's a wrap on this episode of Progress in Practice. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. A big thank you for listening, and a big thank you to Nick for taking the time to tell us all about the work that's going on at Rose Family Estate. I really did enjoy that conversation and felt like it could have gone on for quite some time. Have many unanswered questions that I'll have to go back to Nick on another time. Anyway, listening to Nick and just reflecting on the conversation, it really stood out to me how Rose Family Estate are thinking long term. This is not a short-term project. Yes, there's some immediate benefits for them, but this really was about thinking long-term and thinking about future generations. And look, they're a family business, right? So perhaps many more businesses should take inspiration from that kind of family intergenerational thinking. I also was just really fascinated in the breadth of actions that they're taking. So it wasn't just this one, the wastewater treatment plant, but also the plantings, etc., that they're doing, and they're thinking about what now to do with what they call the lees, the material that is left in the bottom of the wine tanks. As Nick told us, Beer has got that solution by turning it into marmite, the equivalent leftover material that comes out of beer can be turned into marmite. They don't have that same option to them due to the various types of molecules that are in the wine, what they call lees or the wine waste. But they're now working with others and collaborating with others within Marlborough around a solution for the whole region. And it just really highlights to me the value of getting going with sustainability in the circular economy, right? We know we've got to do it. It's just a matter of physics that we've got to go to the circular economy. And they started with this, well, not started, but this wastewater treatment plant was a big step for them, and they invested a lot of time and money and effort and energy into it. But as Nick spoke about, it's given them a lot of confidence to push forward and to more things and progress further, right? So I think that's just a lesson for all businesses, that big or small, just getting started, is a really important part, and you'll learn a lot and you'll build confidence and you'll build capability. It's something we talk about a lot at Go Well Consulting and the businesses we work with. So there was a couple of key takeaways from me anyway, plus also just learning more about the volumes of water that go through a vineyard and the processes involved. It's really quite fascinating. Hey, if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd encourage you to explore more about Rose Family Estate and Wairau River and the other brands. You can see them, the links below and wherever you're listening or watching this. And if you do know someone in the food or beverage or primary industry sector who you think should hear this, please pass it on. There's some really exciting things that are happening there. And I really enjoyed the link with Rose Family Estate and what they're doing with that waste or the lees at the end with biochar, and the conversation that we've had in another episode with Emma from Kowtow about what they've done to turn their discarded clothes into biochar. So it's really starting to link some of those inter-industry circular economy solutions together. Progress in Practice is brought to you by Go Well Consulting. If the themes we explore in this series resonate with you and you'd like to explore what this kind of thinking might look like in your own organisation, you can find us at gowellconsulting.co.nz. We'd love to have a chat. Look out for the next conversation, or make sure you go and have a listen or watch to the other Progress and Practices that we've got. You'll find them wherever you listened or watched this one. And thank you again for taking the time. Cheers. Mā te wā.